Well, when people think of the Outlaws in the 1930s, they usually picture something more dramatic right out of the gate. Big robberies, fast cars, guns a-blazing. It's not how most of these stories actually start. We know that. Most of them start slow in places nobody remembers with people who don't look dangerous.
Right.
Not yet. The Barker-Karpis Gang, they're no exception. Before they were ever a headline, before the kidnappings, before the shootouts and the FBI manhunts, they were just some poor kids, bad students, petty thieves, and repeat prison inmates learning how the world really worked. You can't understand how this gang operated unless you understand where they come from.
No.
And that starts with two separate paths that eventually collide in all the wrong ways.
Well, one of those paths, old Canada. Alvin Francis Karpis, August 10th, came into this world in 1907 in Montreal. Parents, Lithuanian immigrants, poor. They were not connected in any way to any type of organized crime. They were working class people trying to survive in a crowded city that did not offer much room for failure. Karpis grew up around poverty, frustration, and crime that was right out in the open. Theft was not some exotic idea. It was the way people got by. Montreal in the early 1900s was a city where immigrant neighborhoods were dense. Work was unstable. Petty crime, very common. Young boys saw theft, hustling, small scams not as moral failures, but as survival skills.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
This environment did not create criminals on its own, but it did remove many of the barriers that might have stopped one.
As a kid, old Alvin, he did not show signs of becoming some charming outlaw figure. He was quiet. He was serious. He was not particularly likable either. But he was observant, and that would matter later. Teachers, they describe him as withdrawn. Other kids, they didn't see him as a leader. He didn't dominate rooms. He watched them. He was sitting in the corner humming. He absorbed details. That personality trait would later make him far more dangerous than louder men with quicker tempers.
Oh.
And that's those quiet ones you got to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
By his teenage years, Karpis, he was already involved in petty crime, small thefts, break-ins. Things that barely register in history books, but absolutely shape a person, and especially old poor people like Karpis.
Right.
He was arrested young. The first arrest didn't scare him at all. It did the opposite. It introduced him to prison.
Oh, no shit. Well, prison for Karpis was not just punishment. Education, baby. At a time when prisons offered little in the way of rehabilitation, inmates learned from each other.
So just like how it is now?
Right. They learned techniques. They listened to stories. What worked and what failed. Prison functioned as a networking hub for career criminals. Young inmates like Karpis were exposed to men with years of experience. Inside, he met experienced criminals, bank robbers, safe crackers, guys who knew how to steal cars without drawing attention, guys who had robbed the same bank twice and gotten away with it. He
Apparently didn't get away with anything else because they're in the fucking prison.
Right. He listened, he watched, he learned. And he learned what mistakes not to make. He learned how real criminals thought. They're real criminals. They want to be in prison. Exactly, right? Oh, my goodness.
Well, that's why they're criminals, because they're in prison.
All right. Karpis would later say that prison taught him discipline. He learned patience. He learned that the most dangerous criminal is not the loud one. It's the one who kept his stupid mouth shut. He also learned that most criminals were caught, not because they were unlucky, because they were careless. Too much talking. Too much drinking. Trusting the wrong people. Staying in one place way too long. When he got out, he was not interested in small-time work anymore. He said, nope.
Well, and that leads us to the other side of the story, which is the Barker story, which that don't bring him a crime either. Begins with a family that struggled, moved constantly, and never really found stable footing. Kate Barker, she was born in 1873 in Missouri. She married George, and together they had several sons. The marriage didn't last, but being poor did.
Oh.
After the marriage collapsed, Kate, she raised her children largely on her own. Family drifted through Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, chasing work and stability that never came.
Wow.
The boys grew up in rented houses, temporary arrangements, and environments where long-term planning was luxury.
Wow.
Kate was strict, protective, and deeply loyal to her sons. She distrusted authority figures, particularly police and social workers.
Damn right.
And passed that skepticism down. The boys learned early that the system didn't work for people like them. And they didn't go to school long either. They drifted, picked up odd jobs. Learned early that authority figures didn't have much to offer them.
No.
These sons, they were Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, known as Doc, as we said, and old Fred.
Fred, huh? Nice. Herman Barker, oldest. His life set the pattern early. He fell into theft and robbery while still young, and repeatedly arrested. By the 1920s, prohibition running strong. Prison was already a familiar place. 1927, Herman died behind bars, officially from illness. Well, that death mattered.
It mattered to me, man.
As you think it would for that family. For Kate, it reinforced a belief that the system destroyed her children. For the remaining brothers, it hardened their resentment and deepened their bond. Herman's death was not something they moved past. No, it shaped how tightly the family closed ranks afterward. Lloyd, he followed his brothers into crime and also prison. But his story diverged. While involved in robberies and theft, Lloyd eventually pulled away from the core group. He would later cooperate with authorities. This is the decision that effectively erased him from the gang's inner circle.
I would assume so.
Arthur Barker, known as Doc, he was intelligent, methodical, deeply committed to criminal life. Old Fred, he was the most volatile. He had a temper. He drank heavily, prone to violence. They go hand in hand.
Right.
Hand in hand. Together, they became the most active criminal members of the family. Old Arthur and Fred.
By the time they were young, crime was already a part of their lives, like we said. They robbed, they stole, they went to prison, they got out, they did it again. This cycle repeated so often it barely registered as interruption. Same old stuff. It's not unusual for the era either. The criminal justice system was a revolving door, especially for property crimes. Right? What made the Barker story different was the brothers, they stayed close. They trusted each other. They're like Daltons. They worked together when they could, and their mother was always present.
Damn right.
See, Kate, she didn't operate in the background. She lived with them. She traveled with them. She handled daily life. She cooked their meals. She kept watch. She also benefited from the money, more importantly.
She was a leader.
Whether she planned crimes or simply enabled them is still debated, but she wasn't ignorant. Later, the FBI would paint Ma Barker as she would become known as a criminal mastermind. That version played well in headlines. A ruthless mother directing her sons. The truth is a little more complicated.
Right.
Many historians believe she was a fiercely loyal and deeply involved mama, but not the strategist the Bureau claimed. They had to have a scapegoat.
Right.
What is certain, she knew exactly who her sons were and stayed with them anyways.
Of course.
It's her mama.
Right.
By the late 20s, 30s, Barker brothers were already part of the Midwest criminal network. They knew other robbers, other getaway drivers, other men who lived out of suitcases and stolen cars. And this is the Barker-Karpis paths cross. In prison.
Damn. Karpis, Fred Barker, met while incarcerated. The exact prison and timing still debated today. But the meeting itself...
Why is it debated? We don't know what prisons these guys were locked up in?
Right. But the meeting itself is not. They did not meet during the robbery. They did not meet through family. No.
Shit, they met in prison.
Is this a fucking Dr. Seuss fucking...
He did not meet them there. He did not meet them anywhere.
They did not meet in robbery. They did not meet their family. They met inside, where criminals exchanged ideas and tested each other's intelligence. Fred Barker, rougher than the Karpis. More volatile. But he was loyal. He had experience. Karpis, quieter, sharper, more strategic. They recognized something in each other. When they got out, they stayed in touch. And that is where everything truly begins.
Well, by the early 30s, the Great Depression was in full swing, as well as big bands. They were swinging. Banks were closing. Money was scarce. But oddly enough, that made bank robbery explode. Oh, why was that odd? People hated banks. Some even cheered robbers. And law enforcement, they were overwhelmed. For criminals willing to move and take risks, this was opportunity. And it came a knocking. Minnesota, as we know, we've heard about these guys even during Wild West years.
Right.
Became one of the hottest spots for bank robberies in the entire country. St. Paul, in particular, gained a reputation among criminals. It was known as a place where outlaws could hide, find crooked connections, and avoid immediate arrest. Good for them.
Right. This reputation, not accidental. For years, St. Paul operated under an informal system, sometimes called the Layover Agreement. Criminals passed through the city. They could avoid harassment as long as they checked in with certain police officials. And they paid bribes and promised not to commit crimes while they're there. It was not protection forever, but it bought some time.
Okay.
It's time to rest, time to plan, time to disappear again. For mobile criminals like the Barker-Karpis crew, St. Paul, invaluable. Barker-Karpis crew began operating in this environment.
They robbed banks across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and neighboring states. These were not sloppy jobs either. They were planned. They watched towns. They timed police response. They stole cars ahead of time. They switched vehicles after the robbery. They disappeared. These robberies followed a pattern that Karpis believed in deeply.
Oh.
No unnecessary violence, he says.
Yeah.
No lingering. No repeating the same town. He believed the job was not the robbery itself, but the escape afterwards. Yeah. They did not want to stay anywhere long. They moved constantly. They used cheap rentals. They used aliases. They avoided patterns as much as possible. I will give anybody $5 if you count how many times we said they in this episode.
Right. Well, Arthur, they call him Doc Barker, as usual, joined the core group. Fred, he was already central. Their mother remained nearby, living with them or close enough to stay informed. Other associates drifted in and out. Some were useful, some were not even trusted. That was how gangs worked then.
I would say always.
Loyalty mattered, but usefulness mattered more. What have you done for me lately? One associate mattered was Volney Davis, also known as Curly Davis. He was not a flashy criminal, not at all. He was not known for violence. What made him valuable was organization. He handled logistics. He helped plan jobs. He knew how to move money. He knew how to rent properties.
No, we really need somebody that knows how to rent these properties. I have no idea what we're doing.
And he knew how to communicate without drawing attention. It's not that fucking hard. During kidnappings, he would become essential.
I bet. Another figure orbiting the gang was Walter McGee, former chauffeur with connections to wealthy St. Paul families. McGee, he wasn't part of the inner circle, but he would later play a critical role as an intermediary. By 1932, the gang, they had money. Not a lot, but enough to live on the road and keep operating.
Right.
But bank robbery, they have its limits.
Yeah, especially in 1932.
Right. A good robbery, it might net a few $1,000, sometimes less, sometimes more. But every job increased the risk. More witnesses, more descriptions, more pressure. Then you got an MO,
right.
And now they know which banks you hit.
Right.
They started talking about kidnapping now. Kidnapping wasn't yet the go-to crime. It would briefly become here, as we've seen a lot of folks that we'll get to.
Right.
The Lindbergh kidnapping, we'll have a remastered episode on that. Shocked the country in 1932, and it showed criminals that a single victim could be worth more than dozens of robberies.
Damn right.
Also showed how dangerous kidnapping was.
Well, these guys were idiots in the Lindbergh one.
Yeah. But the Barker-Karpis gang believed they could do it better than anybody.
Oh, but did they? Well, they believed they could plan it carefully. They can control their victims. They can control communication. They can collect money. They can release the victim alive and then disappear. They were wrong about one thing, though. They didn't know that yet. Their first kidnapping target, you guessed it, William A. Hamm Jr. Hamm with two M's. He was wealthy. Mm-hmm. Connected to the Hamm Brewing Company.
Oh.
He lived in St. Paul. He had routines because on the 15th of June, 1933, Hamm left his office in St. Paul. And this is when it happened. 4 men grabbed him, forced him into a car. No long struggle, no shouting. It was fast. They drove him out of Minnesota into Wisconsin. This is where they forced him to sign ransom notes. There was 4 of them. Each one proved that he was alive and under their control. Hamm, he was calm under pressure. He followed instructions. He did what they told him to do. Well, that's what following instructions.
Right.
The gang believed this made the operation smoother. I mean, if you just
right.
I mean, if you just follow along, but you can go a lot smoother.
Well, they didn't keep him in Wisconsin very long as they moved him out to Bensenville, Illinois. It was quiet, close enough to Chicago to blend in, far enough from St. Paul to complicate the search, and offered an anonymity without isolation. He was held there while the gang negotiated through intermediaries. The ransom demand was about $100,000. In 1933, that was a fortune because that's like a couple million.
Mm-hmm.
The Hamm family, guess what? They paid. I mean, it's their patriarch, right? Money was delivered according to instructions. Hamm was then released alive near Wyoming, Minnesota.
Right.
From the outside, it looked like a perfect crime, but it was not.
How many times have we heard that before?
Right.
The FBI recovered ransom-related materials.
Okay, whatever that is. Look, we found a pencil.
On those materials, fingerprints.
Of course there were.
Latent prints. The kind that could be lifted, compared, and matched. This was a turning point. The OFBI was still growing into its role as a national law enforcement agency. The Hamm case became a major example of how forensic evidence could be used in kidnappings, even though much of the investigative work still relied on informants and local police cooperation. Names began to form around the crime. Files were opened. A lot of manila envelopes there, baby.
Right.
Agents began quietly comparing notes. The Barker-Karpis gang did not even know how close the net was getting. Instead of stopping, they escalated. And that escalation would bring far more attention, more pressure, consequences they could not control. 6 months later, they went bigger. January 17th.
Because they didn't want to go home.
Right. January 17th, 1934. Edward Bremer. He's a banker, St. Paul.
Uh-oh.
He was also a friend of President Franklin
See, why
Roosevelt.
are they doing St. Paul people when St. Paul's supposed to be like their hiding place and shit?
Idiots. Why would you do a friend of President Franklin Roosevelt?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think they knew that, though, right?
He was well respected. He was visible. And that made him a powerful target.
Apparently they did.
All right.
He wasn't just wealthy. He represented stability, respectability, and political connectionability. Taking him wasn't just a crime, it was a challenge. Oh. That morning, Bremer dropped his daughter off at school. As he returned to his car, two men, they snagged him up. One of those men was old Doc Barker himself. They punched him. They pistol whipped him. They forced him into the back of his own car. He was bleeding. They put blindfolding goggles over his eyes. Oh, blindfolding goggles. Then something went wrong. They couldn't start the car.
What?
Bremer, injured and blindfolded, had to show them where the starter button was. Oh, it's one of those. Only then did they be able to drive off. That's crazy.
Wow.
Later, they switched cars, said, fuck this button, abandoned Bremer's blood-stained vehicle. When his car was found, police feared he had been killed. He wasn't. He was taken to Bensonville. Once again, just like old Hamm. The repetition, it would later matter, yes. Thought Carper said we don't do this stuff.
Come on.
Karpis. He was held in a small room, chained, threatened, told his family they would die if police were involved. Wow.
Ransom, $200,000.
Oh.
The gang communicated through Walter McGee, former chauffeur and trusted associate of the Bremer family. Notes were left.
Associate of the Bremer family? Wow.
Right. Notes were left, instructions given, codes used. McGee appeared cooperative, but McGee was terrified. Unknown to the gang, McGee went to the police and federal authorities almost immediately.
He said, come on, man, you're messing with my friends now.
He believed they could resolve the situation quietly. He believed the kidnappers would never know. Well, guess what? He was wrong.
He was wrong again.
When the gang learned that McGee had contacted the Popo, panic set in. Trust shattered. They threatened to kill McGee. They threatened to kill Bremer. This moment marked a shift inside the gang. What had been controlled during the Hamm kidnapping now felt unstable. Adolph Bremer demanded proof his son was alive. The gang forced Edward to write a note, begging to be returned to his wife and children.
Well, Adolf tried to negotiate the ransom down. He said, I ain't paying no $200,000. He pushed back. He stalled. Inside the gang, though, tempers flared. Fred Barker exploded in anger. He believed the negotiations were dragging on too long. Like, what are we doing? They're just buying time to find us. He believed McGee's involvement had compromised everything. He suggested killing Bremer to send a message.
Damn right.
Fortunately for old Bremer, Doc and Alvin Karpis, they overruled him. Karpis himself believed killing Bremer would guarantee relentless pursuit. Yeah. He believed the entire country would turn against them. He also believed this was the line that we can't cross, boys. That's too far.
Yeah. Eventually, the ransom was paid. The money dropped according to instructions. George Ziegler, he collected it. Bremer, he was released alive.
Good for him.
From the outside, it looked like the gang had done the impossible once again. But internally, the damage done.
Yeah, you can't have internal strifes.
The gang fled immediately. No celebrations. No lingering. No whores. They did not even divide the money calmly. St. Paul, no longer safe. They just kept grabbing handfuls.
Right.
We'll count it later. Send it in the mail.
That ain't happening.
Ransom money.
Paid to the order of. No, Walter McGee, he was then arrested and later convicted for his role as an intermediary. He went to you guys.
Oh, that's bullshit.
His cooperation would continue to haunt the gang long after the kidnapping ended, though.
They had to arrest somebody.
Right. Feeding paranoia. Well, now they know who everybody is, though.
Right.
Feeding paranoia and tightening the investigative net. The FBI and local authorities now had two major kidnappings tied to the same gang. Similarities, they were impossible to ignore. The use of Bensonville, the negotiation style, the handwriting, the associates. Pressure increased. The gang knew it. So they did what anybody would do. They left the country and went to Cuba.
Oh.
Yeah, that decision was driven by fear more than strategy, clearly.
Yeah.
They believed Cuba offered distance and a way to clean the ransom money, yes. In the mid-30s, Cuba was not an exotic fantasy at this time. It was a real refuge for criminals, gamblers, and fugitives, a real rough place. But even there, unease set in. Karpis later became deeply uncomfortable with the move. He worried the laundering was sloppy. He worried the money could be traced. Most of all, he worried the FBI already knew far more than they were letting on to the public, that is.
Right. Well, the gang didn't stay long in old Cuba. They returned to the U.S. They chose Florida because it was probably the closest.
Right, like, I don't feel like traveling no more.
Florida in the 30s was attractive to criminals for a few reasons. It was warm, had transient populations, and had places where people could rent houses without too many questions. Lake Weir, in particular, offered isolation without being completely cut off. The gang rented a house near the lake. It was quiet, surrounded by trees, easy to watch the road, easy to disappear. At this point, the gang was smaller at that time. Fred Barker, he was there. Ma Barker, of course, she was there. Doc Barker, he moved. Karpis was in and out. Volney Davis handled logistics when possible. Other associates drifted away. They were trying to breathe, but the weight of what they had done was finally catching up.
The weight of Officer Chauvin on their neck.
Right. Kidnapping was not like robbery. When you rob a bank, anger spreads. Some people even cheer you on. When you kidnap someone, especially someone wealthy and well-known, anger sharpens.
It doesn't, though. I don't know that. Law enforcement, they don't forget. At this point, the gang believed they were hiding. Okay. In reality, the FBI, they were closing in. The Hamm kidnapping fingerprints and the Bremer case had created a paper trail that refused to disappear. Agents are now working the cases full-time. Informants, they're being squeezed. Old associates were being questioned. Every name connected to the Barkers or Karpis was being polled, reviewed, and cross-referenced. This wasn't a casual investigation no more. This was priority. At this time, the Bureau was still finding its footing. It expanded rapidly, gained new authority, and made high-profile mistakes. Yes, they did. The most embarrassing was the raid at Little Bohemia we covered in Dillinger and Babyface's episode.
Sad.
We all know that went bad. Innocent people dead. Targets not. The press criticized the Bureau. Internally, it was viewed as a failure that couldn't be repeated, ever. Unfortunately, they didn't get that message.
Right.
Because of that, agents became more cautious. They watched longer. They verified information. Then just roll up on fucking people and start shooting them.
Right.
And they cautioned. And that caution would matter.
Because on the 8th of January, 1935, Doc Barker arrested in Chicago. Major blow to the family. Oh, Doc, he was not just a participant. He was family, obviously. He was trusted.
Oh, shit.
He was trusted. He knew locations.
Ooh.
He knew habits, safe houses, and names. He knew routines. He knew where people went when they needed to disappear. With him, Byron Bolton, minor associate. Bolton did not hold up. This was one of the ugliest truths of outlaw life. Not everyone stays loyal under pressure. Bolton cooperated with the authorities in exchange for leniency. He talked, gave names, described movements, identified places. For the FBI, this was direction, not guesses. Direction.
Who wrote that shit?
Bolton's cooperation pointed agents toward Florida, toward Lake Weir, toward the Pacific House. But the Bureau did not rush. They watched, they confirmed, they planned.
They were cautious. January 16th, 1935. Before dawn, agents surrounded the house near the lake. Earl Connolly, he was in charge. Agents positioned themselves carefully around the property. They knew who they believed was inside. They believed Fred and Ma, they were there. They weren't certain about Karpis, though. They didn't kick the door in. They called out and demanded surrender. They got nothing. They waited. Called out again. Nothing. Waited a little bit more. Then they said, fuck this, we're firing tear gas in the house.
Ooh.
That's when everything exploded. Someone inside shouted back, almost taunting. Then machine gun fire erupted from an upstairs window. Not a brief exchange either. This was a prolonged gunfight. The Barkers inside the house were heavily armed, rifles, pistols, obviously a machine gun. They fired repeatedly from the upper floor, blasting through walls and windows. The FBI returned fire, stayed behind cover. They waited for movement. They were determined not to repeat Little Bohemia at any cost.
Right. Wow. Hours passed.
Well, I hope this time they surrounded the back of the house at least.
Right. Hours passed, gunfire slowed, and then stopped altogether. Agents waited longer. Then they finally moved in. They did it cautiously. Inside that very house, they found Fred Barker and Ma Barker dead. Weapons everywhere. Ammunition, firearms stacked, scattered. House looked less like a residence and more like a bunker.
Because what it was.
The official FBI story was clear. They said old Fred and Ma died fighting. They refused to surrender. They chose death over capture. The FBI made sure the press saw the scene. The FBI wanted the public to understand why this ended the way it did. They emphasized the firepower. They emphasized the refusal to surrender. They emphasized that agents had been fired upon. Later analysis and eyewitness accounts would raise questions, though. Some believe that Ma may have been killed early in the gunfight.
Ma! Ma!
Some doubted she even fired at all.
She might have.
But those doubts never displaced the official narrative. What the FBI did not know yet was that Alvin Karpis wasn't there. He left days earlier.
Oh, when they did realize it, frustration set in immediately. They had eliminated part of the gang, but the man they believed to be the most dangerous, they were still free. For Karpis, the Lake Weir shootout was a turning point. Fred, dead. Ma, dead. Doc, jail. Associates, cooperating. Gang, finished. Now, it's just him. On his own. Survival. For the FBI, the Lake Weir shootout was supposed to be the end. But it wasn't. When agents realized old Alvin was gone, the victory felt incomplete. They're like, fuck. Fred and Ma, they were dead. Yeah, the organization was shattered, but the man the Bureau now viewed as the brains behind the gang, he's still running amok. For Karpis, the Lake Weir shootout marked the final break.
Right. He moved consistently. He avoided old contacts. He avoided predictable places. He understood that the FBI was no longer hunting a gang. They were hunting him.
Yep, they don't have to spread out. They got everybody focused on you now, buddy.
The Bureau was officially designated Alvin Karpis as public enemy number uno.
Look at that.
It meant priority. It meant resources. It meant manpower. It meant his name was circulated nationally. It meant agents in multiple cities were alerted. It meant pressure following him everywhere.
Jeez. All right.
This was not symbolic. This was operational. It meant that Karpis changed how he lived. He used aliases consistently. He rented rooms briefly. He moved through cities without staying long enough to be remembered. He avoided public spaces. He avoided crime. This is an important detail.
Yeah, it sure would be. Oh, good Lord.
Old Karpis, he did not continue to rob banks. No. He knew that any crime would draw attention.
Well, I'm sure you got enough money, bud.
Instead, he lived off remaining money and focused entirely on not being seen. The FBI followed the lead slowly. They lost him, but they found him again.
Yeah, they followed informants. They tracked patterns. They built files. They compared notes across jurisdictions in ways that had not existed just a few years earlier.
Oh.
Meanwhile, the legal fallout from the kidnappings continued.
Oh.
Valney Davis, Curly, he became a central figure in the prosecution of the Bremer kidnapping. He was arrested, escaped, recaptured, and eventually convicted. His case dragged on, involving testimony, cooperating witnesses, and extensive evidence. Old McGee, he was convicted for his role and sentenced to prison. His decision to contact authorities during the Bremer kidnapping had saved Edward Bremer's life, but it didn't spare him from punishment.
Hey, idiot.
Doc, on the other hand, he was convicted, sent all the way to Alcatraz.
Ooh.
That was a message. The government sent its most dangerous and unmanageable inmates there to demonstrate that escape, communication, and influence. They were no longer options for you, pals.
Well, Doc, he said, I will not accept that message. Because on the 13th of January, 1939, he attempted to escape Alcatraz. He climbed fences. He reached the rocky shore. Guards were like, there he is. And they ordered him to surrender. He attempted to construct a makeshift raft, but shot and murdered. That was the end of the Barker story for Doc. Fred Barker, Ma Barker, dead. Doc, dead. And their story frozen in that Florida house near Lake Weir.
Well, Doc's in the frozen San Francisco Bay, but... Yeah.
Right. Lloyd Barker remained separated from the gang's legacy, living out his life, away from the mythology that surrounded his bros and his moes and his brothers. Other associates faded into obscurity. They died in prison or disappeared into records that no one revisited. Karpis remained. For more than a year after Lake Weir, he stayed ahead of the FBI. This is until the 36th of 1900.
The year of our Lord.
This is until May of 1936.
Well, then they located him in Nolens. FBI agents, they moved carefully. They were cautious. There was no shootout, no chaos, no gunfire. He was arrested quietly. Old J. Edgar Hoover was present in his dress. Hoover understood the importance of symbolism. He understood that this arrest represented the end of the public enemy era. He made sure it was photographed, publicized. He made sure the narrative was clear. We caught him. Karpis was convicted and sent to Alcatraz. He would spend decades in prison, longer than almost anyone else. He became the longest-serving inmate in Alcatraz history. Prison, once again, became observation. He watched guards, watched inmates, adapted, survived. Years passed, hell, decades.
Oh.
He became a living artifact of the public enemy era. Reporters wrote about it. Some historians debated. He was eventually paroled in 1969.
No shit.
By then, the world was unrecognizable to this guy. Old Alvin, he was released parole in 1969 and deported to Canada. Back to Canada. Initially, he had difficulty obtaining Canadian passport credentials, having had his fingerprints removed by underworld physician Joseph Morin in 1934.
No shit.
He then went back to Montreal. He wrote his first memoir in 1971, while another one was published in 1980, 1 year after his death. During his first book tour across Canada for Public Enemy #1, Karpis, looking more like an accountant than a gangster, still showed a dry sense of humor. In Edmonton, while shuffling Karpis between various interviews with media, M&S book representative Ruth Bertelson stopped at her bank.
Oh.
Asking Karpis if he wanted to come in with her, Karpis replied, "No, dear. You take care of the vault. I'll drive."
Right.
He became a mentor to her young son, and to the sociopathy of some of his advice to her child angered Bertelson.
Oh.
Listen to that man.
Wow. He ended up moving to Spain in 1973. And on the 26th of August, 1979, Alvin Karpis, dead. Originally ruled suicide, but sleeping pills were found by his body. But it was later ruled natural causes. Robert Livesey, who co-wrote Karpis' 1979 book, said that Karpis was not the type to kill himself, no. He said that Karpis was a survivor.
He ain't gonna give up.
He served 33 years in prison, damn it. And also stated that Karpis was anticipating the publication of the book. He believed that Karpis had been introduced to pills and alcohol by his last girlfriend, Nancy, to give him a relaxing high, and perhaps Karpis accidentally overdosed on one occasion with fatal consequences.
Yeah, it happens.
No autopsy, and Karpis was buried next day in San Miguel Cemetery in Malaga, Spain.
All right. The Barker-Karpis Gang existed for only a few violent years, but their impact enormous. They helped push the FBI towards national policing, towards forensic evidence, toward coordinated manhunts. They weren't legends because they were charming. They were legends because they were effective. And most importantly, deadly.
Wow. By the time old Fred and Ma were dead, we're dead in that house near Lake Weir, the Barker-Karpis Gang as an organization was finished. By the time old Fred and Ma were dead in that house near Lake Weir in Florida, the Barker-Karpis Gang was done. The money scattered, safe places burned, trust network shattered. Stories like this do not end calmly or cleanly. They drag on. They echo.
Echo.
And for Alvin Karpis especially, the end was not a dramatic final act. It was a long, grinding stretch of paranoia, movement, and isolation. Dead, imprisoned, or forgotten. And that is the Barker-Karpis Gang.
What the fuck happened to Alvin? What happened to him when he got out?